Oh, hello. You may have noticed I'm now eternity. I am the living embodiment of all existence, and I am completely and totally omnipotent. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, doesn't that use a lot of electricity? Yes, it does. In fact, it uses so much electricity, I have to be plugged into the mains at all times, or I will simply vanish into thin air. This means I can never leave this room ever again, which, when you're omnipotent, is quite a disappointing outcome. You're also probably thinking, isn't becoming omnipotent and the living embodiment of all existence a little overboard just for recording a video? But there's a reason for it, and the reason is this. I'm a bit mystical today because for this video I'm going to be going a bit strange. I'm going to be going Doctor Strange. The first Doctor Strange story I ever read was in the pages of Marvel UK's Avengers Mag. I think it was either issue 8 or 9. And it was the famous story, the one where he fights a house. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that doesn't sound very dignified. But you have to remember that Doctor Strange doesn't have what you could exactly call a huge villains gallery. So clearly there are weeks when he has to fight what he can get. Next week, he's going to be fighting a shed. As for the tale, it's approaching dusk and a reporter stands outside a house, declaring that he's going to spend a night inside it. Now this might not seem much of an event, as most of us spend every night inside a house, but it's not just any house. It's a house that for years has been rumoured to be haunted, and this daring feat's to be broadcast live to the nation as he answers once and for all the question of whether or not there are truly such things as ghosts. The baffling thing is that having made this announcement, he then enters without any cameras, suggesting he doesn't really know what television is, nor that he understands what proof is. Is the whole of America really supposed to sit there all night, watching as he completely out of view describes what he's seeing, especially if he's seen nothing because the house isn't haunted? I do have a feeling the network executives haven't exactly thought this out as well as they might have done. Obviously, there is a real-life parallel to this, which is about 20 years ago, the BBC decided to do exactly the same thing. They sent some presenters into a house that was supposed to be haunted to broadcast live from it and see what happened. In that case, it all went a bit wrong because they were killed. And people were not very happy. Now, it wasn't real. It was all hoax. It was all scripted. But so many people had been convinced it was real that I think it was the most complained about TV show in British television history. And that does bring to mind an incident from the 1980s when, presumably inspired by Threads, my local radio station, Radio Hallam, decided to broadcast a nuclear attack warning. For some reason, one Sunday night, after the news, a presenter came on and he said the Russians had launched a nuclear attack on Britain and we all had 3 minutes to live. Oddly enough, this didn't go down well with the listeners. I do remember a woman in the local papers complaining that when she heard the news, she flung herself at the floor and started screaming and crying hysterically, which didn't seem very British. It also didn't seem very practical because, as we all know, if you find out atom bombs are on their way, the correct response isn't to fling yourself at the floor and sob and cry and scream. It's to climb into your fridge. I really don't understand this because every time I bang my fridge door on the side of my cooker, it leaves a great big dent in it. So I don't understand how that's going to survive an atom bomb. That does raise the obvious issue of Threads. As we all know, Threads was a movie from the 1980s. It was about Sheffield being blown up by atom bombs. And I know when you watch Threads, you're supposed to be horrified by it. You're supposed to think, that's put me off nuclear war. Up until now, I thought nuclear war was just a bit of fun. Now I know there's a downside to it. But I have to admit that when I watch Threads, all that ever happens is I sit there going, oh, look, there's the town hall. Oh, look, there's Fargate. Oh, look, there's the Peace Gardens. Oh, look, there's the bloke who played Tina's dad in Coronation Street. If he's Tina's dad in Coronation Street and he was in Threads, it explains why Tina in Coronation Street always looks almost burnt to a crisp by incredible levels of radiation. So at least that's one mystery cleared up. As for the proof, almost as soon as the reporter's inside the house, he sees a lamp float past him. So that's that question answered. Ghosts do exist and it can come out and go home now. Except he doesn't. The baffling thing is that instead he promptly declares that he's so far seen no signs of supernatural activity and must explore further. I'm sorry, but what does he think a floating lamp is if it's not a sign of supernatural activity? So far, he doesn't know what television is, he doesn't know what proof is, he doesn't know what an investigation is, and he doesn't know what supernatural activity is. You can't help thinking that if he was sent into the Congo to look for the last surviving dinosaur, he'd do it without knowing what a dinosaur is, and stand there, microphone in hand, declaring, "I've so far seen no signs of a dinosaur. Maybe I'll be able to see better if that giant scaly reptile will get out of the way." So, unencumbered by competence, he continues his investigation. But that's when something evil manifests itself, and that's enough for Dr. Strange, who, after messing about with his all-seeing eye, decides to enter the house. He decides to enter not like you or I would, but by barging everyone aside with a force field while insulting them, which does make him come across as a complete and total jerk, which is a bit unfortunate as he's supposed to be the hero. Having said that, I do sort of wish I could barge people aside with a force field myself, preferably one that can also disintegrate them as it does it. Obviously, I wouldn't want to disintegrate people from Sheffield, as that would reduce the population, meaning I'd live in a smaller city and therefore feel less important, so it could just disintegrate people from Leeds, or Manchester, or Chesterfield. People from Sheffield it would just maim, which I feel would be the ideal solution to my manoeuvrability problems. Once inside the house, Strange too sees the floating lamp. Unlike the reporter, he spots that this might be the sign of the supernatural, and upon being attacked by a mist, draws on his multiple catchphrases to defeat the mist. You do have to give Stan Lee credit here. He actually manages to fit 4 Doctor Strange incantation cliches into one utterance, which must be a record. So, having proven his superiority, Doctor Strange orders the house to release the reporter, then tells it that it's too big a menace to be allowed to stay in this world and must be banished back to its own dimension. At this point, you do have to question in what sense it's too dangerous to remain in this world. Exactly what threat does a house pose? It's got no arms, it's got no legs, its eyes are on the inside, which I can assure you is the worst possible place to have your eyes, and it has no knees. It's very difficult to invade a planet if you have no knees. Not that Doctor Strange cares about that. Next thing you know, he's banishing it back to its own dimension and declaring, "It's done! I have triumphed!" Well, yeah, you would. You've been fighting a house. We can all defeat a house. I once beat my house. I beat it at Monopoly. I don't like to boast, but it was a pummeling. You can't help feeling he's overly bigging up his opposition here to try and make himself look good. Then we get the final panel where we're told that as he leaves, the onlookers are in awed silence at what they've seen him do. I have a suspicion that they're actually thinking, he's defeated a house. He's not exactly Superman, is he? Now you may think from this that I don't like this story. I do. I love this story. It may just be because it was the first Doctor Strange story I ever read, but I suspect it's more because it's like a throwback to the sort of stories Marvel was doing before it rediscovered superheroes in the Silver Age, back when it was doing monster and mystery comics. It's like Steve Ditko decided that he still wanted to carry on doing those stories, but because Marvel were concentrating on superheroes, he decided to create a superhero-type character and fling him into those stories, so it would fit in with the then-current Marvel style. You have to say Doctor Strange in this tale, he's not very likeable, and you can see why they decided to humanise him more in later stories. You can't really sustain a strip for decades with a character who's so aloof and conceited and arrogant and unpleasant. But it doesn't really matter in this tale because the focus of the tale isn't really on Doctor Strange. I mean, he's the hero, obviously, but the focus is really on the house and the mystery of the house. So in a one-off tale, it doesn't matter that Doctor Strange isn't very likeable. So that's it, I've made it to the end of the video without being attacked by Dormammu, assuming that's how you pronounce his name. I mean, for all I know it's pronounced Dormammu, or Dormammu. I don't have a clue. I don't know if Dormammu knows how it's pronounced. To be honest, I suspect that most Marvel villains don't know how to pronounce their own names. I'll bet Annihilus doesn't have a clue how to pronounce Annihilus, and daren't ever say it in case he looks stupid in front of other people. I do have to admit, I don't really know how to end this video. I was going to end by having Barbara Dixon on singing a song like I did with the last one, but unfortunately she seems to have disappeared. It's almost as though she's burst. So instead I've decided to end with a question mark, because I know from watching 1950s B-movies that it's always best to end with a question mark if you want to make something seem more exciting. It's a good rule in life, always end with Barbara Dixon or a question mark.